Now, India's Supreme Court is hearing arguments on legalizing same-sex marriage. The country's highest court has been petitioned by 4 gay couples who say they are denied rights to things like medical consent and adoption because their unions aren't recognized. In 2018, the very same court decriminalized gay sex in what was a landmark ruling for India. To talk more about this, we can bring in Joydeep Sengupta and Blaine Stephens, a married couple who are plaintiffs in a case on the recognition of same-sex marriage before Delhi's High Court, which has now been transferred to the Supreme Court. Great to have you both here on France 24. Joydeep, you're no longer a citizen of India. You're a citizen of Canada and now France. So why are you a plaintiff in this case?
So I'm what is called an overseas citizen of India. So India is one of the countries that doesn't recognize dual citizenship. So I was born an Indian citizen. So I have this special status called OCI, which allows me to live and work in India. I can do everything except for run for public office or own agricultural property. And typically that status is also given to married couples and their children. In our case, because our U.S. marriage is not recognized in India, I'm unable to offer the same status to my husband and to my daughter.
Blaine, you're living in France. Your marriage is recognized here. It's recognized in the United States where you got married. It's even recognized in Canada where you're a citizen of. What reaction do you get when you travel to India and tell people that you guys are married?
Very positive reaction. We've worked in India for years now, and I have colleagues there. All of them know about our relationship, congratulate us on our daughter who was born a year and a half ago. I have a very, very positive reaction. The fact is, though, that our relationship has no recognition. If I were to fall ill, if there were an issue involving me while Joydeep was there, he would really have no say over what happens to me or any sort of course of action in India. So for me, that's a fundamental right that we think that we should be able to have and enjoy in India, just as we do here in France.
So when you travel to India, you apply for a visit visa each time, for tourist visa?
Yep, absolutely, every single time. I'm required to apply for a visa every time I come. I get long stay visas. I get multi-year visas. I can come and work and live in France or stay in India for a number of years. But as someone coming for business or for family reasons.
The other piece maybe I would add to that is that visa wouldn't have allowed him to travel during COVID period.
Exactly.
Right? So that is something that was only afforded to people with OCI status.
You're a lawyer by profession, Joydeep. What does the Indian Constitution say about marriage? Is it between a man and a woman?
So it doesn't define, marriage between a man and a woman. However, the Supreme Court of India issued a decision, as you mentioned, in 2018, which recognized the equality rights of queer couples. And as the Supreme Court of the world's largest democracy, the court has been very progressive in recognizing the rights of minorities. And so the argument that we're making fundamentally on the principle of equality, dignity, and the right to privacy, which are all rights that have been recognized in similar constitutions like in the United States and in Canada. And we feel that based on those constitutional principles, that there's no barrier to recognizing our validly performed foreign marriage.
When thinking of an eventual decision from the Supreme Court, one has to keep in mind attitudes and society as a whole. Do you both think India is ready for gay marriage?
I think that in many ways, India has shown itself ready for gay marriage.
Given that gay sex was decriminalized just barely 5 years ago.
I think here we have a case of the law lagging behind public opinion and attitudes and practices in many ways. What we see existing in Indian society, in this case, it seems absurd to many people like myself, looking from the outside in, to see a country like India, which is so progressive on so many fronts, yet have this colonial era law on the books all the way until 2018.
Joydeep, sorry to interrupt you there, but what do you feel, because you were born in India, you're a citizen of Canada and France now, your marriage is recognized, as I said, in 3 countries that you have attachments with, but not the country of your birth, not the country where your mother is living in. How does that make you feel?
As Blaine was mentioning, there's a disconnect between, when we're socially, when we're in India, I'm treated by my friends and family as a married couple. But the law doesn't recognize that. And your earlier question is is the country ready? And I think as a large, diverse country, not everyone will be ever ready, right? So I think that's something to recognize, that even the U.S., which had to decriminalize interracial marriages, if you ask the same question today, there might be segments of the population that may disagree with interracial marriage. So we cannot hold back equality rights because it may not be 100% accepted by everybody. But at a fundamental human level, I think the principle of equality is so fundamental in India, and it's a secular republic, and so a validly performed foreign marriage should be recognized in India under the same equal basis.
It makes sense, right? I want to ask you, because you were born in India.
Yes.
You clearly have attachments to the country, given that your mother still lives there. Do you keep up to date with what is happening in the country in terms of Bollywood movies? Do you think that enough has been done to change attitudes in society? Because we do in India know that there are very prominent individuals who are gay. Everybody knows they're gay, whether it's businessmen, whether it's actors, whether it's directors, but they don't come out and physically say that they're gay. Do you think they're holding society back in a way with this reluctance not to come and admit that they're gay, come out of the closet, essentially?
So, I mean, I think the choice of each person, whether they want to come out as LGBT, should be individual and should be left up to each person. And we cannot forget that until 2018, being openly gay could have led to a criminal punishment, right? So it could potentially put somebody in harm's way to come out of the closet. But at the same time, I think there's been tremendous openness in areas of society, like you mentioned Bollywood, you mentioned some of the national television, newspapers in particular have covered this issue quite extensively. And if you look back on social movements, there have been many organizations that have been working specifically to protect LGBT people for decades in India. So, obviously not enough has been done to really raise the awareness of these issues at a wider social level. But we also have to remember the context that until 2018, being openly gay could have, gotten you fired or, led to other negative consequences.
We've not really had much political reaction to the case that is before the Supreme Court. But there is this fear that political parties, the party in power, essentially will come out and say gay marriage is against Indian culture.
Sure, and the same has been said in many other countries. In every single Western country, if you look at the debates in the United States, in France,
there were debates in France. There were protests in France for weeks on end.
Exactly. So in every country where this is not an easy issue, I think because of historical reasons and religious considerations, in many countries this has been a difficult issue. But in India, which is a country of equality, where the dignity of the individual has been protected repeatedly in the Indian Constitution, and the types of arguments that we're making is that this is not going to have any negative consequences anybody else, other than simply protecting the rights of two individuals who love each other and have a family to simply be protected equally under the law.
And you, as a lawyer, what do you think is going to happen? Because I listened to an interview of one of the lawyers who's arguing the case in front of the Supreme Court, and he said a lawyer is not going to take a case that they could potentially lose in front of the Supreme Court. So are you both hopeful that the Supreme Court will, give us a landmark ruling here, essentially?
I mean, the pace of change has been quite spectacular, right? You went from 2018, where homosexuality was decriminalized, to now, just a few years later, that they decided to accept these cases. I think it's a good sign. What's interesting to remember is not all of the cases that have been accepted for this hearing are filed on the same legal basis. So our cases filed on the basis of the Citizenship Act and the Foreign Marriage Act, right? So simply recognizing a foreign marriage, but not necessarily requiring India to legalize marriage.
Yeah.
It's interesting if you look at Israel, that's a good example, because Israel, while it doesn't offer same-sex marriage, it recognizes validly performed foreign same-sex marriages. And that was a decision of the Israeli Supreme Court. So we've kind of made a similar argument in our case, and we hopefully one of the arguments will stick.
Fingers crossed. Let's see what happens. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24.
It's our pleasure.
Great to have you.